Hey everyone, Ro here. So it's been a week now since New World went live, and I think it's a good time to summarise my overall thoughts. Now, I certainly have not been hardcoring it by any stretch of the imagination. The aim for me is always to enjoy the playing experience far more than getting to max level and the end game ASAP. And that is especially important in new MMOs, where the end game really doesn't evolve until at least 6 months later. But that said, my playtime at the moment stands at 17 hours. And honestly, that speaks to a lot that New World does right. Firstly, this New World itself. The world they have created is beautiful and immersive. At first, washing up on a rather mundane beach, I was a little doubtful to say the least. However, once venturing into the heart of the island, you soon begin to experience this amazing landscape. This isn't your typical fantasy MMO, one zone snow leading into garden fields, with the one after that being volcanic eruptions. New World flows far more realistically, so as such there's a similarity between the areas. Woodland and hills dominating the aesthetic, and maybe that's a con to some fans who would prefer more drastic variation, but for me it definitely works. There are times combined with the quite simply stunning soundtrack that I've just paused to stop and just take it all in. Heading up a hillside or beside a rippling flowing river, you really feel like you're running across the set of The Last of the Mohicans. The whole frontier setting is just perfectly encapsulated, and somehow they've really managed to blend it in with the fantasy aesthetic really quite well. Honestly, it's just great, this vast untamed wilderness of the frontier, just evoking a sense of adventure. And the size of New World is actually quite impressive too. While the map looks like there may only be a few zones, by the time you've actually trekked across that horizon to reach the next walled settlement, you actually feel like you're returning to civilization from the wild. Now really the success that goes hand in hand with this immersion is the gathering and crafting system. The gathering in particular is fantastic. You can literally gather anything you stumble across, from mining the largest boulder, chopping down trees and watching them timber, which is particularly satisfying, to collecting buckets of water, vegetables, harvesting and scavenging herbs. Whatever you think of, you can most likely do it. And this adds to making the world feel truly alive. And once you combine this with the fact that these materials obviously mean you have a great crafting system to match. And all of this revolves around an auction house economy. If you want to make a living being a successful blacksmith, then you can truly be that. It's the kind of system so many MMOs have tried to get, but have ultimately failed. So I'm really pleased to say that so far New World has absolutely got it right. Now, is New World perfect? No, it's not. I'm still not overly sold on the combat system yet. As a melee fighter, it still feels a little tricky at times in facing enemies once you've started a combination of strikes. If there's a sudden movement, you'll find all your attacks going in the wrong direction. However, this is something I've got much more used to as I've played. So these moments are becoming less and less, and they're certainly not as frustrating as they were at the very start. The range combat is very enjoyable by comparison and obviously doesn't suffer from these flaws. With you actually having to aim at the targets you're looking at, it does add a satisfying level of difficulty. Overall, I think once playing a little longer, those melee targeting systems won't even be something I think about. But if you're going to be a new player stepping in, it's worth keeping in mind. You may find yourself being a little frustrated at the start, but stick with it and you'll soon find yourself getting used to it. Now, another area of concern, and maybe a larger one, is the balancing of the faction system. On my server, for example, virtually the entire player base has chosen Syndicate, which now obviously dominates the territory and thus PvP. Now, me not wanting to just follow the herd, I have happily chosen the Marauders. However, unfortunately, the population difference is so large, I'm already seeing comments in the chat of upcoming server transfers already, which from past experience only ever makes the problem worse. You can really use World of Warcraft as the perfect example. As soon as they opened up server transfers, populations on servers between Horde and Alliance went completely out the window. Servers were no longer truly balanced, and this problem dogged Blizzard for so long, they eventually had no option but to merge servers. As for New World, there really should have been some form of population cap put into the factions, ensuring the even balance. It's really not rocket science to know that once a faction is clearly the most popular, all new players will continue to join that one, fearing being on the weakened side instead. And again, implementing server transfers will not solve this problem. Instead, you'll only have servers simply owned by individual factions. People wanting to play Marauders will find the Marauder-dominated servers, and vice versa for the Covenant and Syndicate. So Amazon, I hope you're listening, because you've done so much right. It would be a crying shame if you threw it all away. Overall though, that's about it for negatives. I mean, could there be more quests? Well, yes there could. But then the territory system does mean you're supposed to be grinding to help your factions out. And I for one really do enjoy feeling like I'm doing that, especially being on one of the underdog sides. It really gives me the feeling that I'm helping to stem the tide. Now what else? I love that there's a housing system in the game from the start. I love that weapons and armor define your class role. So if you want to switch anytime you can. You just have to invest the time to level in that new area. With each weapon having its own spec trees, I feel that Amazon has reached a very good balance. And I also love the fact that guilds can play a meaningful part in the faction war, even if I myself have yet to join one. Personally, I've always preferred to stay in a smaller guild with my friends, but if they don't come to join me, then maybe that's something I'll have to look into. So again, lastly, overall, New World simply does a lot of things right in my opinion. And again, this is from someone just enjoying the game. I'm not looking up specs online or rushing off to get to endgame. I'm simply enjoying the game and world like it was meant to be. Taking my time to do a little bit of crafting or just enjoy the environment as I'm gathering as I go. Now, could this opinion change in the future if the faction war isn't fixed? Yes, absolutely. But for now, especially as a subscription-free game, I really do recommend picking up New World. I would be surprised if you regret it. But that's it for today, guys. Huge thank you again, and I'll see you all again real soon.